decided we'd get together again just to chat about this problem where parents are under a lot of pressure with children with now what is regarded as addiction. So I know Dr. Pradeep Chadha, after the other night when we chatted, I know a lot of people were very interested in what you had to say. Cormac the same, and Megs in London. You have a nursery. So I suppose the best way to open it up is to, in your own opinion, guys, do you think that's like what I see in my clinic? Do you see it as a big problem? Megs, I suppose yourself, if you want to talk about it in London, because you're in nursery, you're seeing children first time. You can explain what you do as well, by the way, to people.
Well, I've been running a nursery, Montessori nursery, for 30 years now, and I work as well with parents, doing parenting courses over here and working with becoming conscious parents, because a lot of parents we feel we ourselves, myself included, are unconscious, and we kind of follow the norms and we forget that the children are watching our behavior and they learn from us. So the whole thing, which I always go back to what Mahatma Gandhi said, is if you want to change something, be that change yourself first. So I work with that premise for the parents here, and I'm finding a massive problem. I'm actually detoxing children from screens, and it is really, I mean, I'll get passionate here now, I'm sorry, but I have children, it's like coming off of cocaine. Cormac, you know, it's like bringing them down off cocaine. I've got children screaming outside my door. They're 4 years old because their parents have just taken the phone off of them, and the parents are going, I don't know why they're crying. I don't know why they're crying. I said, were they using the phone in the car? And they said, yes. Have you taken it away from them? Yes. Did they start crying then? Yes. So it is addiction. And we have children as young as 18 months coming here. And I was saying to Michael the other day, we have photo albums because we have no technology, absolutely no screens in our nursery. And we have a big fight with the government over this. And we had an old-fashioned photo album, and the baby was trying to swipe the pictures. So I've realized at that moment that there's a big problem. So now I'm doing a big research with the parents in my nursery, and they're all on board. We're doing a questionnaire. I'm sending out an article about why I'm doing this, and they're all on board, and they're all begging Michael for a solution. In the 21st century, they're begging for a solution. So if we can do this, I'd love it. I'm also the early years childhood representative in London, so I could bring this to the early childhood forum. If we can do something, Michael, I would love it.
I think Pradeep, I suppose it's the challenge. You know, we're in clinical practice every day, both yourself and myself, and we see that firsthand. The challenge that parents have, they just, they're struggling to find a solution or a number of solutions to a multifaceted, complex issue, isn't it? It's so difficult. What do you feel?
That's right. Margaret has just pointed out a very important aspect in all this. The children are going to behave as parents behave. So the parents have themselves to take the lead with regard to what needs to be done with the child. It is very easy for them to say that the child has got addicted. It's very difficult for them to have a look at themselves as to what they are doing. As I pointed out the other day, children's basic life is with their parents. And children want to and would like to and would love to engage in activities with their parents. And parents have to take time out to engage with the children that way. And that is one way in which these addictions can be limited. But then addiction happens when things go overboard. If you take one drink in a while, that's fine. But if you drink 10 drinks a day, 7 days a week, you have an addiction. It's just like that. So my grandfather used to say that machines, I mean, in those times when these machines were not there, and he was a very wise man, he used to say, machines are as good as you master them. The moment you become their slave, you have a problem. And this is exactly what's happening. So children are becoming slaves to these machines, and parents aid into that. And one of the classical things that is fascinating about parenthood is that the moment children start to throw tantrums, parents want to solve their problem right here and now. Addictions have to be confronted, as Margaret has just pointed out. the child has to be allowed to play their tantrums.
Yeah.
And that is something that parents need to accept. And that is something that the change needs to come.
Yeah.
If parents are giving the children these phones to get rid of them, then this problem is going to end up in medication, as we discussed the other day.
Like young people are under savage pressure. We know that. Pressure peers from their peers. And in a way, sometimes, have parents lost their children? And Cormac, you briefly chatted the other night to the group when you were talking about your own experience. But if you were to go back a little bit before you explain about your experience and your life and all of that, what kind of led you into the world? Was it through the phone, or what led you into the world of where you ended up in, where you did become addicted and then eventually had to find yourself in a situation to realize that this is a problem, as Pradeep says?
Yeah, it's only something that I'm learning through my sobriety, really. And it's the patterns were always there. But I suppose when, going back 6-7 years ago, when Instagram became a big thing and everything was through Instagram, I suppose I was always looking at what other people had, and I was always constantly comparing myself to what other people were doing as well. So I think I always strived to be like someone else, and I was never happy in myself. And that was true online, that was through social media. So constantly comparing myself to others. And that's what kind of made me want to move country and I suppose go for something else that no one else was doing. And that was, with my modeling and reality TV. And I suppose I kind of dove into that environment as well. But it definitely did start through online, because I think with social media these days, you can follow anyone from every country, and it doesn't matter what they're doing. And I think it has such an impact on people's mental health, because I think they're constantly comparing themselves to other people, rather than being happy for what you have. So that, for me, that was a big thing as well, was social media,
And like what Pradeep was saying, that did that happen, do you think, within home, where maybe subconsciously or unconsciously parents were just saying it's okay for you to be on your social media, be on your Instagram all the time? Is that something just parents are not aware of?
Yeah,
they're not doing this.
100%.
They're not doing it consciously. It just happens.
I think it just happens because I came from a big family. I have 4 brothers, 1 sister. We never grew up with gaming. We weren't allowed. We were a really outgoing, sporting family. But I suppose when it came to the phones and technology, my parents weren't aware of it. They could barely get onto their email and their laptop, or like they can do now. But going back 5-6 years ago, they weren't aware of that. And I suppose parents nowadays who were growing up with kids who are literally going up and they're getting their iPads or iPhones for Christmas. I met a friend a couple of weeks ago, and she has a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old, and the two of them have brand new iPhones. And I couldn't get over that, so they're automatically getting these presents. And I suppose that's just the way the world is nowadays, but I think people keep saying that as well. And the parent had said that to me. She's like, look, all the other kids have them. But I just think that's not really a good enough excuse. If someone else has them, why should your kids have them as well,
Yeah, because Mags, you were saying there earlier on, I mean, given that we've entered the age of technocracy now, and technology is a part of our life, and there's lots of good things, do you see the benefits that children have from that digital free zone?
I do, Michael, and I think what's happened, and a lot of my parents are millennial parents. They're young mothers and fathers, so they were brought up on screens as well. And what Cormac was saying, I know we were brought up as well in Ireland with we didn't have phones in my day, of course, 25 years ago, but we did have, that was a joke, that we did, you do go out all the time. And I think, like Cormac was saying, that his parents didn't know the dangers of it, because they thought, oh, my child is a child of the 21st century, so we have to have him one of those 21st century children. And that's what our parents are thinking, but they must learn how to use technology. That's the way the world is moving forward. But what they're forgetting, Michael, and this is where I come in, I think, with the parents here, is the human tendencies that children have, the natural human tendencies that we have as a human race, for order, for movement, for all the things that we do as normal human beings, that those things are limited when we allow the children to use screens. So people say, there was a big discussion here about, well, why doesn't Montessori use screens in their nurseries? And the argument was, Maria Montessori was born in the late 1800s. If she was born today, she would use a screen, and she would have the children using screens. And I say categorically, no way, because she knew the development of a child, and all the great philosophers, Dr. Pradeep will vouch for this, knows how children develop. It's a natural state. So we've got to get the parents to go back to understand that your child doesn't need a screen until after the age of 15 or something, when they're capable of doing a little bit of work on a screen, but not to the point of getting addicted, and they need it because their brains are developing at the age of 0 to 7. The first 7 years, we know all this. Give me a child at 7, I'll return you a man. That was the wrong thing to do. But the other one was the first 7 years you play with your children. All the great philosophers tell us this. If you do the first 7 years, you play with your children. The second 7 years, you guide your children. The last 7, they become your friends, and they'll tell you everything they will share their life with you. But that the screens are taking it away. The great Steve Jobs, he would not allow his children to have the iPad because he invented it. He was the great mind behind it. So getting parents to understand this is to get them away from the idea that the 21st century children must use screens. We have to show them another way to teach their children, to learn with their children. Dr. Pradeep said it, time. And time is something that parents believe they don't have because they're...
Yeah, I mean, the research, you're right in what you're saying there. The research is showing, Pradeep, isn't it, that it is influencing the developmental stages and causing that sort of addictive personality, that sort of ADD personality, that personality that's aggressive and agitated. So there's no doubt that what Max is saying there is that it is interfering with the developmental brain of the child, albeit the positives can be associated with it. It is interfering with that.
I think the number of ADHD is going to increase with this thing. So that's another problem. So other than the addiction, you are going to have children who don't get enough time with their parents. And one of the theories, and it has been proven in certain studies, that children who with ADHD, when they are given physical affection and touch, they actually improve. But obviously we are living in a society in which pharmacology has the upper hand. So it suits parents and the medical system far better to diagnose someone as having ADHD and start medicating them. So that's another problem that's coming up. So other than the addictions, ADHD is going to increase. It's highly likely. But my concern basically is that if parents are not educated enough, and if they don't get the wherewithal of what they need to do to spend time with their children, you will see in 5-10 years time, the number of children who are going to be consuming antidepressants and anxiolytic drugs will exponentially rise. At this moment in time, you still have psychiatrists that say that children should not be given medication below the age of 14 years, and yet it is being given to 12-year-old children. And that is going to increase because this is the way the world is heading. And that's my concern as well, other than the addiction. So the parents are the one that we need to target, to teach them that they need to spend time with their children. They cannot complain that they don't have time.
Yeah. And also, Dr. Pradeep, to show them how to spend this time.
Yes.
They don't know how. Michael, they've lost it. Parents have lost the ability. Go back to our parents. They knew how to do it because they literally kicked us out the door, basically, and we didn't come home until we were hungry. So today, the excuse is, oh, we can't send our children out. They can't go out on the streets on their own, but there are other ways to be outdoors. And I think if we can come up with something, I think it's just, they're crying out for it, Michael. I've got lists of parents' names right now who are saying, we want to be part of this project.
And the thing about it is this, Cormac, I suppose, we're coming at it from our perspective. We've had we've been fortunate Pradeep, myself and Mags, to grow up in a time where, you had your family, you worked on the land, your own focus was to try and get a job that was somewhat stable and I suppose pensionable and secure your future. And that's all that kind of bothered you. That's where your mindset was. But you know yourself as a young guy, and the kids, the generations below you, they're stuck in that situation now. And there are all these influencers and people who are, really isn't the digital world. It's like I said this morning on radio, isn't the digital world another world? They're not in this planet. They're not on Earth. And like in that digital planet, that's designed around, monetization, that ultimately it's about money, and even if you decide to use, or if you decide to use your Instagram, and I was talking to a 10-year-old about this yesterday, they all know about how much money they can get for, selling this, wearing this, building their hits, building their likes, the amount of friends they have. Can you elaborate a little bit on that on your side?
Yeah.
Of what you see?
Yeah, it's a good point. I was listening to a podcast with Chris Willis, and he dives into like mindset, and he was actually on a reality show before, but what he was saying is that kids in schools, and I believe this is in London, kids in schools from the age of 10 to 12, they're not saying they want to be a pilot or an astronaut. They're saying they want to be a YouTuber or an influencer. And it's crazy how times have changed. It's mad.
Yeah.
And that really just shows you how times have changed within the last even 10 years, 10 years.
10 years.
And but I suppose it's coming back to the parents as well. And I'll just give you an example. Like I remember when I went into rehab, I had to be open and honest with how much I used and my addiction, and my parents were just oblivious to it. Like, and although I had lived away abroad for some years, they just didn't know about my addiction at all. And I think that comes down to, or that I can compare that to parents not knowing anything about Instagram or whatever social media platforms. And I think someone had brought it up on the Monday night meeting there as well. I think it's very important if a child or teenagers as well are following these people from different countries, and you're talking about that influencer world is its own world itself. And if you're not familiar with it, it's basically a highlight reel of these people's lives, and that's all they show is the highlights, the best day, how much money they're making, their cars, women, whatever. So they're influencing products and different companies to the world basically. So all these children, all these teenagers, and people my age and everyone else's ages are looking at the best possible day they're having, or weekend, or it's a lot of these influencers, they're not actually showing the real person that they are, like, so I think that can kind of put it into a kid's or a teenager's head that, okay, I want what he or she has, because look at their life looks incredible, but really it's a bubble. Do you know what I mean? It's not actually the real world.
Cormac,
I was guilty of it myself.
And Cormac, can you see then that these young kids could move from one addiction into another, where they could move from an addiction to like addiction to alcohol, to drugs, to
Yeah, I was just gonna ask Pradeep as well, because you had mentioned kids who are going to be on their phones, and then there's a high chance that they're going to have ADD or ADHD. And I think I definitely had that when I was younger as well. I was always constantly wanting attention. And I found when I wasn't getting that attention, I kind of just, put my attention into using and drinking. But I wonder, and this is a question for you, Pradeep, would you reckon if a kid is going on medication at an early age, you reckon the chances of that kid becoming an addict with alcohol or drugs is even increased?
You see, one of the principles of all addictions, if we go into the medical aspect and medical explanation of that, physiological explanation, doctors would say that all pleasure activities involve dopamine.
Yes.
Yeah.
So simply speaking, whether you are watching television for 8 hours, or whether you are on phone for 8 hours, or whether you are taking cocaine, or whether you're taking heroin, everything involves dopamine secretion. Yeah. And once the brain gets used to dopamine, and if you take the person off the phones or take them off TV, then there is a rebound impact. And the person craves for that dopamine stimulation. And that can be attained with anything. So if there is no TV or screen available, the person will start taking benzodiazepines if they are available.
Hmm.
They will start smoking weed if that's available, just because the body is now craving for that dopamine kick.
Yeah.
So yes, there is a likelihood of crossover addictions once this happens, and probably because the world lives on the basis of fear and makes decisions on the basis of fear. If parents are informed that this is a concern that they need to have, if they don't do anything about it, maybe the millennials who have been used to the screens all their lives will start to rethink as to what they want to do with their children.
Hmm.
So, so just on that there, guys, we know now that children have adapted a behavior. Not just children, adults, and I want to include myself in that. I spend a considerable period of time. Now, I come at it from a business perspective, but I'm still spending a lot of time on my social media platforms and IT stuff because that's where the game is at. But now we know that it's a reward system, as Pradeep has outlined, that it's the reward you get, that the brain secretes these hormones, this what we call dopamine, amongst others. Now we know what that is what parents are, what we need to do now is replace. So addiction is a habit, and I suppose maybe phones are a little bit easier to deal with, but if we have to, is there something that we can replace that? I mean, in my clinic, I'm working with energy, nutrition, and I'm looking to reset and reconnect the system for yourself, and to get the support with the likes of Pradeep and, looking at getting the support and parents and things like that. But what is the fact that we have lost touch with the spiritual aspect of our being?
Yeah.
Is that really, can we say to people today that if we can get kids out in nature and get them doing fun things outside, that we can easily get the same kick and dopamine kick and all that? How do you feel about that, Pradeep?
Margaret has just pointed out very aptly that outside activities are mandatory in my view, as far as their growth and development is concerned. But along with that, if the weather is not good and if they can't go out to play, at least they should have, they need to have, I wouldn't use the word should because I hate the word should. They need to have activities within the four walls as well, which involve that they can concentrate on activities, they can solve problems, they can learn new words, they can have the challenge of solving puzzles or constructing things so that their mind can expand widely. So other than the activities which are very beneficial, and I don't need to go into the science of that, outside activities, this is where children learn.
Yes.
And if along with that, the parents can spend time in outside activities and inside, and outside activities also involve children playing with their own peers, because that is what is also being lost.
Of course.
So there are two kinds of sets of activities that they can engage in, and they have to be done regularly. So in a 24-hour cycle, 8 hours are spent in sleeping, 8 hours are spent working, but the rest of the 8 hours with the family spends together. As much time as needs to be spent or can be spent together in having breakfast together, dinner together, playing together, discussing things together, even fighting together, arguing together, playing outside, going for a walk. All these activities are mandatory, necessary for the families to be together. Interestingly, you will see in the future as well, these addictions are going to break families. Children will lack the ability to be able to integrate within in relationships because they are going to be affected. We are now seeing very little children, small children. When they grow up and become adults and they are hooked onto these screens, it is going to affect their personal relationships.
Of course.
Yeah.
And it's going to affect
I
the
second that.
Yeah.
Just from my experience as well, my job, which was online and on my phone, affected my relationship with my girlfriend at the time, my family especially, because every time my parents had come to visit me, I wasn't there. I wasn't in the presence, and I didn't see that at the time. But you know, going through counselors and everything like that with my family, you know, that was almost brought up more than my addiction to drugs and alcohol was my phone. And looking back at it now, you know, I know that, but at the time it was very hard for me to see that. But understanding and hearing that from my family as well I felt was very hurtful for me. But I needed that. I needed their honest opinion of that. And one of my main addictions was my phone. So, to your point.
Yeah, I mean, Mags, I mean, I know that when we were chatting the other day, you were saying that some kid had come to you and upset, and you told them all to just bring them home, even if the weather is bad. Because when I grew up here in Ireland anyway, and I knew as well, Mags, and to a certain degree you as Cormac, like as soon as you got up, you were out the door, and like your parents didn't care if you never came back. You know, the important thing is they knew you were out, and you weren't getting up to any harm. You know, you were out in the land, you were doing stuff. Have you brought that into the practice in your nursery in London?
Yes, I have. I mean, the parents know that we have no computers or anything here in the nursery, and we never will. And we have big problems with government about this, but we still fight them. And the parents come to me with, like the other day, I was telling you that one of the parents came and she was really upset. She was, I'm having a bad day. She has 3 children. She's dropped one of them to me. She literally shoved her in the door because she had to get rid of her because she couldn't cope. And she goes, there's nothing open. I can't take them anywhere. So I told her to go home, put on some Wellington boots, put on some warm clothes and go in the park and have a picnic and pack all the stuff in. And she said, a picnic in the park? It's the middle of winter. I said, so what? So what? Just try it. She came back and she goes, oh my God, it was so good. The children loved it. They were filthy dirty when they came back. And I said, this is what we need to do. Don't be afraid to step out of what you think the norm is, because people are thinking that the norm is, and like you said, Michael and Dr. Pradeep and Cormac, you said the same thing. We're now at the moment being fed a narrative of fear. Best way to control anyone is to put them in fear and forget what's going on around you. So all the parents are in fear. So they think that if they step outside of anything, they're not going to move away from, they're going to be doing something wrong. Dr. Pradeep said about bringing even indoors. We need to go back to the basics, I believe. This is the way I look at it. We talked about our childhoods or whatever. There's nothing stopping parents of today to bring children up like this, to go back to basics. Turn off the phones, turn off everything, even if it's just for 1 hour in a day or 15 minutes in a day, and take out a board game, snakes and ladders, Scrabble, whatever it is. Take out and sit down and go around the table and say, parents will go, oh God, I hate this. Okay, just try it for 10 minutes and see what it feels like to do a Scrabble game or a snakes and ladders or anything, even a physical, even dancing. And I tell the parents this, just dance, turn off everything and dance. Have even if you don't want to have music, tell stories, go around the fireside, tell stories. And we do it here in the nursery. I started a story the other day with my children about a chicken, and the chicken was in so forth. Suddenly that chicken went to the moon and he was an astronaut, and the children had made up they were stunned because they don't get told stories. And they're not allowed to hear things because they're put on an iPad to listen to a story, and the parents go, they only listen to a story. I say, why don't you tell them a story about your childhood, about what it was like when grandma was alive, or whatever, So I think it's about trying to help parents to see there is another way, because they've been fed the narrative that there's only one way. And parents' biggest fear is their children are going to be stupid. So that's stupid, or they don't look the right way. Cormac, I'm sure you'll say about this as well. The idea of being, and I just heard the word influencer now. I'm not really sure what that is, but I'm assuming it's somebody who influences somebody else. Yep. But all our children want to be famous. They want to be famous. They want to they want to look good. They want to be skinny. The girls want, I've got teenagers, I work with teenagers as well. And they want to have the right hair color, the right size. They have to look right. So if we can move away from what that looks like for the parent, because the parent has fed into this. If my child doesn't look the right way or doesn't have a tutor for 6 hours of a week to get the best results, we can move them away from that by showing what Dr. Pradeep said today. If some of the parents heard what this man has just said, they'd all be like, oh my God, I don't want my child on ADHD. And we had a child like this, Dr. Pradeep. The child was ADHD. I went to the pediatrics with the parents. We go for all the meetings, and the doctor was an amazing man. And I said to the doctor, the child uses the screens a lot. I said, how about before you diagnose him, could you please let us take him off a screen and see what happens? We took him off the screens for 3 weeks. 3 weeks. We took him back to pediatrics. There was no diagnosis of ADHD.
So
there was no diagnosis, Michael.
Yeah, so that's fantastic. And I mean, we alluded it a little bit the other night, but just looking at that before Pradeep, I asked you to talk about the whole idea of boredom, and is there a need to be doing something all the time? I don't think there is, but going back just briefly to what Mags was talking about there, Cormac, and doesn't this really come down into how these young people value themselves? That is about respect and value, and the value they have and the self-worth, and that they're trying to get that self-worth and value from the peers on their social media platforms. Would you have encountered that in any way, shape, or form? I mean, was it all about the hair and the makeup and the body? And I'm not just saying, is that really? I mean, isn't that what we're talking about, really?
Well, 100%. And look, I was guilty of it. Look, my job, for a few years was to look good in front of a camera, and
that's natural. That's natural for you. That's natural for you, Cormac. You're okay there.
But it was. Yeah, 100%. But you know what? It's something I'm still working on today, and that's my ego and learning how to control that as well. Certain thoughts that come into my head, they're just thoughts, and it's about controlling your thoughts and your ego. And for years I had low self-esteem, but I suppose with younger kids, like when I was younger, I wouldn't have known what confidence was, what low self-esteem was, what an ego, what those words meant. But I think they're very important as well, because kids, as I said before, they're going to be comparing themselves to kids who are a couple of years older than themselves, and wanting to be like them, whether it's looks or personality. And I think that's just extreme pressure on a young kid as well. And I know for me, it had a big effect on my mental health as well, because all those topics that I just mentioned as well, I think they're very important, but I suppose it comes down to that communication between the parents and the kids as well about those topics. I know, look, I have a great relationship with my parents, but I guess I said before, I come from a family of 6 kids, but I suppose I was kind of going in a different direction than my brothers. So my parents and my brothers as well, and my sister, they didn't really know how to converse with me with about that industry that I was going down, and they didn't know because they weren't aware of what was actually happening in that industry, or everything that comes with it. And it's not just about the industry or online as well. It's about having the knowledge and having the communication skills to sit down with your kid or whoever it is, and being able to address that.
Pradeep, I know I was just thinking about it there, about that whole idea of there isn't a need to be doing something all the time, is there? Is there a need? I mean, we talked about the boredom. I mean, God, I was never bored when I was a child. You know what I mean? There was always something. I was up there, was only climbing a tree or whatever. But there is this feeling out there that you need to be doing all the time. Some people think.
During COVID, the mental illnesses have increased. The rate of suicides have increased.
Yes.
People are complaining, and governments are concerned that it's going to affect people's mental health. If you ask me, how has COVID treated me? Very well. I'm happy being able to live on my own. I not needed to go out for the time being. But for those people who have to be doing everything all the time, COVID is a very big thing, because they cannot get out of the house. For people who are used to be on their own, bored, not doing anything, they are the ones who have survived COVID as far as mental health is concerned. So the lesson to be learned here is that it's okay and it's healthy to be not doing something at some stage during the whole day. And that needs to be inculcated on a regular basis, because being bored, and research, well, there's at least one piece of research that says that being bored is a sign of creativity, because boredom leads to creativity.
Absolutely.
That is common sense. But then the other part of it is, if you are used to doing nothing, then when times come when you have to do nothing, it is nothing significant. It is nothing that will shatter your world. It is not a stress on your mental health, because you are used to it.
Yeah.
And when people are exposed to the screen all the time, this is something that they lack doing, because a lot of time is spent in working, in sleeping, in cooking, and all the rest of the time is on screen. So one of the things that parents can do, as you have been asking again and again, is to ration the exposure to the screen for a few hours only in the whole day. And let that be something that the children have to earn rather than as a right. But for the rest of the time, they need to be engaged in other activities. So if they ration, rather than take the screen off only for a few hours,
Yeah.
give them the screen only for a few hours, and let the rest of the time be spent in other activities, like Margaret was saying.
Like, the thing is that if you were to take your iPhone as food, well, would you eat for 11 hours straight in the day? You wouldn't, because you'd become obese, and
Exactly.
you'd end up with disease.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing. We use these appliances. So no one here is saying that there isn't a role that this can coexist along, and we can move into this whole new technological environment. Guys, I was just wondering if the four of us was to decide now to go into some, and I'm putting you on a spot here, but if parents came to us and they said, listen, I want four of you guys to come to my house. I want you to look exactly at what's happening. And be able to say to me, listen, we're going to monitor what's happening, and then we're going to look at what's happening throughout your day, and we're going to then put a strategy into place. How would you view that? I mean, what would your take be on that? What would we do if we were to do that? I mean, I can go in and I can teach them I can show them how to work with the energy to relax and release the stress from the child. We can talk with them about the food, the likes of yourself. Cormac, you're into sports now, and you're training and personal training and all that. And Pradeep, from the psychological side of it, your own experience, Mary, or Mags. So, if we were to simplify that and pull that down and be able to say, this is the way, that you do it. You ration, you take time away. It probably takes time, doesn't it, Mags? I suppose we'll start with yourself first to try and put that little kind of a plan into place for parents, because it is a shift. It is a shift that people have to make.
It is. I think after I sent out to the parents that I wanted to do this research project, and then when you said it on Monday, I was like, wow, this is from the universe, this is from God, whatever you want to call it, this is meant to be. Because the parents were bombarding me, yes, when are you going to start it? When are you going to start it? They're all searching. Now, I realized if that's going to happen here in my nursery, it's going to happen in every nursery I go to, and I'm going to go out to everybody. And I've started with a questionnaire, basically asking them to honestly answer how much do their children use screens, how much time they use it, do they use the screen themselves, and have they suggestions for what they could do not to have the children on the screens for too long. Because I totally agree with Dr. Pradeep, you can't go cold turkey. No. You have to allow the children to have some time. But I want to go back to something you said earlier, Michael, about the spiritual aspect of this. And I'm not going to go, I do a lot of work on the soul, on the ego soul dynamic, a lot of work. And I love that Cormac said he didn't hear about the ego until much later in life. None of us did, Cormac. I'm still trying to train my ego, I am. So, but I think we have to help our parents, because it's got nothing to do with the children. Nothing. It's got nothing. Every parent thinks when they come to me and say, can you help me to fix my child? I go back and all my parenting talks are about, we start with you, mommy. Why me? I'm a great mother. Fantastic. I hope you are. I'm sure you are. But let's look. My daughter will tell you all my faults as a mother. But my daughter, I'll give you an example. Michael knows her very well, is autistic. She's got high functioning Asperger's syndrome, and she's also got epilepsy. She's 17 years old. She's never used screens. She just got a phone recently, and she has no time. She's never been on social media. She's no time for any of those things. And the reason being was I made a conscious decision when she was little not to do it. So I would have the house full of books and games. I'm not too good on games, but always card games. But I had the house full of books, and I was constantly reading. So she's an avid reader and wrote a book when she was 12 years old. So all of this was based on my kind of research, because I was like that as well. I was cutting the screen, Michael. I still have a phone. So what I realized was, if we can, like you said, Michael, every parent is begging for help. But like Dr. Pradeep said, we need to be able to give them the type of help that they can easily put into their lives, into their lifestyle. Because one of the things we are growing up in, as you all realize, is a fast-paced, throwaway society. Click Amazon, you get it the next day. If you don't like it, you throw it away, you send it back, you get another one. Click that one. It's so simple. I am an Amazon freak myself, so I'm trying to detox from that. So I see that if we can get the parents to go back to that spiritual aspect of looking within, and I'll tell you why. We've got 2 to 7-year-old, 8-year-old children in my nursery. Outside me right now, I'm in the nursery. And we have 24, 25 children at one time. There'll be a time in the day, and this is not a lie, where all 25 children will be sitting in a circle with a candle and the lights off, and they're meditating for 10 minutes. 10 minutes, Cormac.
Yeah,
right?
It's impressive.
Dr. Pradeep. And the parents go, no way has my child meditated for 10 minutes. I said, they have. We call it silence time. And the children love to be silent. But parents believe their children must be noisy all the time, and they must be doing something all the time. I said, they don't. Children love to observe. They love to watch. Why do you think they know how to use the remote control at 6 months? Because they watch everything. They observe you doing everything. So if you can bring silence time into your life, even if that's 5 minutes every night when your children come home, it's a beginning. So it's bringing small little things in to the family life that will make a massive difference. So that's what I think, Michael. And I think Michael O'Doherty, Cormac, and Dr. Pradeep, amazing people, amazing experience. If parents got you into their houses, I think they would just be so pleased. What I'm hearing today is like making my heart sing, because it's people who think the same as I do. But I think we have to go back to the spiritual aspect. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. And our children know this. They know it instinctively. Our children they'll come to me some days and go, what's wrong with you? They call me Auntie. What's wrong with you, Auntie Margaret? I'm like, nothing. My smile's on my face, but my heart is saying something different, and they know it. Yeah. They feel it. Michael, your energy, they know it straight away. They pick up our energy. They see our aura. They feel our energy field. So if we can help our parents to understand this and not be afraid that energy and spirituality and God and source energy is a scary thing because it's religious. It's not religion. It's got nothing to do with it. It's got to do who we are, our true nature. And our children understand that. And we prove it with 25 children meditating in silence. If we can get parents to understand, and that's what I do a monthly parent on Zoom, a monthly parenting session. It goes all over the world now. It's quite hilarious. I don't know how that happened. I do it free because I want the parents to hear, just become conscious parents, parenting with consciousness. Not a lot of us are unconscious. We're walking dead. We're walking around, putting our masks on, saying yes, no, how many bags full. We're not thinking what's really good. Michael O'Doherty, you're always thinking. I know that. You're always outside the box. But I think it's trying to help parents to think out of the box and say, you don't have to be in this box. You can think, go in. And parents are looking for answers from outside. We've got to help them to find the answers within and say, what do I really want for my child? Is it to, my daughter was home educated. She's never been to school. She's never done an exam in her life. She's got no GCSEs or A levels. And she's just been offered a place in university in UEL because of her mouth, because she can speak for herself and she's full of confidence. And that's not because of me. That's also because of what she's been gifted with from God. Now, all our children here are full of self-esteem. They're so positive and strong. Bring them back 5 years later and see it's gone. The school has knocked it out of them. Society has knocked it out of them. It's taught them how to be pleasers and how to behave. So I think we have to, that might have been too much. I'm really sorry if that was too much.
No. It's good stuff, and there's some very good points there. Because
sorry, that was too much.
It's
that
about
was
developing,
being passionate.
Yeah, it's about developing that, and that's important because you have the experience. How would your home, for example, how would you feel about that, Cormac? How would you feel about kids, people your age, but the generations below that? I'm talking about 2 generations nearly below you in the sense of kids in their 3, 4, 5, 6, up to 10, 12, 14 years of age. How would they react to all that change?
I suppose it's like anything really. I suppose with kids, it'll kind of come to, a trial, like not really a trial and error, but it might have to, because
it really, isn't it?
Yeah, because some kids might get it straight away, but some kids won't.
But it's the parents I'm talking about. I'm talking about the parents.
Oh, with the parents, of course, of course.
Yeah.
But same with the parents. I think a lot of parents are going to be really, really, wanting this. But I think it'll take time with some parents. But I suppose that's just again that could come down to some of the parents could be addicted themselves, and when you're addicted to something, you don't want to get rid of it. So
yeah. And Pradeep, how would you think yourself? I mean, I know Mags has covered a lot, and as Cormac is saying, sometimes parents mightn't want to shift. Yourself, as you said, some parents want to have this kind of victim consciousness. I'm a victim of circumstances. I'm a victim of COVID, and how do we break that mold? I mean, ultimately, you think parents would do what the best for their children?
Well, again, Margaret has resonated the same thing that I was saying earlier. The parents need to be sent the message: do unto yourself what you would like your children to do.
Yeah.
Period. And we have to start from parents, and parents have to be educated. And once they start to come on board and they start to adapt to the new way of life, it's then that the children will pick up. So we can advise them all the things that we can, but it will come to a knot because the children are being forced to do things that the parents are not doing themselves. The
family have to be involved.
The children are seeing that their parents are on screen all the time and phones have been taken away from them. The children are seeing that the parents, as Margaret has put it appropriately, if they are used to that silence and the parents cannot do that, well, the children are going to lose that habit of being in the silence very, very soon, because there is no reinforcement. So the primary thing that we need to focus on are the parents rather than the children. And the parents need to get the message that it's your addictions that are being passed on to the children. And you have to change if you want your children to change. It's as simple as that.
And Cormac, finally, kind of you decided that. I mean, you were on a live TV show, Love USA, Love Island USA. It was a big reality TV show. You were involved in all nightclubs and all that in New York. You were in the buzz world all the time. But there came a time, as Pradeep and Margaret and myself are saying, that you had to face up to reality, and it was an unrealistic world. You made a decision. Yeah,
and it was looking back at it, it was kind of, I say it was unfortunate, but I think it was very fortunate, because it kind of, for me personally, obviously it was with my drugs, so I hit my rock bottom, and I suppose the only way was up. But again, it wasn't just the drugs, it was the social media, it was the media, it was the attention, it was I had kind of everything that I wanted, but really it wasn't healthy, it wasn't good for my mental health. And I think that, that I think it's the same thing with the screen times and the gaming and the iPads and everything that comes with that. it's not really good for your mental health, because again, it's going to affect and as Pradeep was saying, it's going to increase the kids with ADHD as well, and that will kind of prolong into something else, you know.
But you decided to do something about your situation, and you decided, that was Bushy Park, was it here in Ennis, was it?
Yeah, so I decided, you know, it was myself, but it was my family as well. My brother had actually flown over to New York because I was in such a dark hole, and I came back within a week. I packed up everything. I was in New York for 4 years, but I packed up everything. I moved home, and I got myself into a rehab center in Ennis here called Bushy Park. And yeah, again, that was me, you know, admitting that I had a problem, which was hard, but you know, I knew it was going to be, you know, I was going to become a better person, and you know, find and stay alive, because I was that bad in addiction. But you know, it was seeking professional help was the first step. And like we're talking as well, you know, like yourself, Mags, you know, with kids, and Pradeep as well, you're professionals. And I think, you know, there's kids out there that need professional help, you know, and most importantly, the parents.
Yeah.
That's excellent.
No, the thing, look, guys, we certainly will have this conversation again. And I think that we should look at all of our experience and bring it together and put a little product together and sort of give that product, I'm calling it product, which is, again, my marketing brain coming in, but it's not, I'm calling it a product. But realistically, in the modern world, we've got to be able to nearly give people a sort of a family guidance manual nearly at this stage. But some sort of manual is the wrong word, but some sort of mechanism to, number one, realize that it is the parents that's going to be the leaders in this. Number two, that there are dangers associated with excessive use of the IT platforms, or it could be food or anything else. Number three, that it does lead, if you have an addiction, or if you're spending too much time, or if you have habits that, you know, force you to be too much time on the likes of IT platforms, games and all that, that it can lead to other addictions. And, you know, as you have alluded to your own experience there, Cormac. So I think that it'll be great for people to listen to what we've just talked about. It'll be great for them to realize that there can be help. It'll be great for them to realize, Mags, that you've done what you're doing in London, and we need to replicate that in a much bigger way. And I think the most important thing, Pradeep, I suppose, is to, and you can have the final word on this, Pradeep, is that we can't surely envisage a world where our young children are going to be taking antidepressants. It would be absolutely huge indictment on us as, you know, generations before them, that if we create that platform for them to exist solely because they can take medication.
True.
Isn't it
We
true?
don't want our next generation to be on medication.
I think that's the last line we leave it. We don't want our children to be on medication or any other drugs. So listen, guys, thank you very much for joining me this morning. I think that this conversation will get out to lots and lots of people. We'll put some meat on the bone in a sense of developing that little program for people based on our own experience and what we all do. And I think that'll be really, really helpful. So we'll be in touch soon. We'll come back again to the public again soon with more chats about this and more ideas and simple little things. So in the meantime, guys, you know, try and have the meals without the phones, number one. Yes, your child can sit down and relax and do that 10-minute meditation, as Mags has said. The other thing, of course, is, you know, getting out in nature, no matter what the weather, getting out in nature, that's very, very important. And if we can just do those simple little basic things, and families have these meaningful discussions around this topic. Otherwise, you know, as Pradeep said there, you know, we don't want our children of the future to be heavily medicated to exist in this planet. So thanks a million, guys, for joining, and we'll be in touch again very soon.
Thank you, Michael.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, guys.
Chat soon. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a good day.